I think it's sailing. You guys can see that, correct?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about Rule 20, room to tack and an obstruction. And I think this is the one thing that it's not confusing, but I think it's one thing that people just need to really understand what the verbiage in the scenario is, because this does come up more than not in in scenarios, and I think it's really good to go over this one. So I'm just going to go through this a little bit and just read it, and then we can talk about it, right? But basically, room to tack at an obstruction. A boat may hail for room to tack and avoid a boat on the same tack by hailing room to tack. So basically, if there's a boat coming, or if there's an anchored something, or there's an obstruction, um, the boat can hail room to tack. Okay. And that means if there's a boat to windward where they can't tack, and then there's certain things have to happen, right? So she shall not hail, which is very interesting here. So let's talk about this, right? She is approaching an obstacle and will not need to make a substantial course change. Okay. Very interesting, right? So what's substantial to me? It becomes very subjective, and I think that's something that can get you in trouble if you're not careful. Um, Again, will soon need to make a substantial course change to avoid it safely, and she is sailing close hauled or above. Okay. So think about at the start when you're reaching around before the start gun and there's a starboard boat coming and you are reaching across on port and there's a boat to windward of you. Are you allowed to call room to tack? No. So that's a scenario that does happen. The only way that you can do that is if you're at close hold, right? And I think that's one thing that people don't necessarily always understand, but you cannot ask for room to tack if you're not close hold. In addition, she shall not hail if the obstruction is a mark. Correct. We understand that. And a boat that is fetching it would be required to change course as a result of the hail. And that one's a little bit fuzzy to me. But obviously, if it's a windward mark, right, there the mark rooms come into play here at the end of the day. So, and if that is fetching it, it would require to change the course as a result of her hail, which it typically would not do. So that scenario doesn't really play out too much. Okay, so let's talk about the hail because the verbiage has become very, very, very important. Okay. After a boat
Wait,
hails,
wait.
which is,
Hang on, Marty.
yep,
So let's just imagine that mark that we're all going to leave to port is a point of land, right? And we're sailing close hauled, and the boat to windward can make the point, but the boat in front and to leeward can't. So, well, so what options do they have? I mean, if
they
they
would have to call for room to tack. Are you talking about them tacking there or ducking in that scenario?
right,
That
so they would have to be able to tack, but they are the windward boat is fetching it, so it's saying that you if the windward boat is fetching it, then they can't ask for room to tack, right? Or can
correct,
they?
correct, right. It would
So what do they
require to
do?
change the
Clear
course
away,
as a
or
result of the
what are
hail,
the
right?
options?
Or do you just then you have to bail out. You have to jibe out or do something else, correct? That would be your
Yeah.
exit strategy in that scenario.
Okay.
If the obstruction is a mark and a boat that is fetching it, it would be required to change course, right? You'd have to change course as a result of the hail, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Still have to have room to tack.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So again, let's talk about the verbiage. Room to tack, right? That's the verbiage that's why it's highlighted by hailing room to tack. After a boat hails, she shall give the hailing boat time to respond. A hailing boat shall respond even if the hail breaks Rule 20-1. So let's look at that, right? So if for some reason, right, that they you basically what they're saying here is the hail boat shall respond no matter what, right? Even if they're breaking the rule above it, the boat that's being hailed to still has to respond. Okay? A hailboat shall respond. Even if the hailing breaks a different rule, you still have to tack and go. Okay? Or the next verbiage that you can use, a hailboat shall respond either by tacking as soon as possible. And that's the gray area again. So if somebody says room to tack, you need to immediately do two things, right? Tack or reply you tack. Okay? And that's the key. The key is, hey, I need room to tack here. You have to respond by doing one of the two things. You tack, and then you have to give the hailing room, to tack and avoid her. Or you have to tack immediately. And I think that's where the confusion happens sometimes. When a hailed boat responds, the hailing boat shall tack as soon as possible also. So let's say, for instance, we're two boats are on port, and the lured boat, 5 boat lengths away, say, hey, I need room to tack. And if the winder boat tacks and the other boat doesn't tack immediately and sails for another 4 boat lengths and then tacks, that's wrong. You can protest against that. So if you are calling for room, it's got to be if that boat tacks, you tack, or if that boat says you tack and then you tack and you can be a little bit closer. So it's important on everybody's perspective, whether you're the boat that's looking for room to tack or the one that's keeping the other boat from tacking through that scenario. Does everybody understand that? Do you want me to go through that one more time? Right? Okay, here's the scenario. We're on a boat, we're on port, there's a boat to windward of us. We have a starboard boat approaching us. 5 boat lengths away, I yell room to tack, and the boat to windward of me on port tacks. I have to tack immediately. That's scenario one. Scenario two, I'm 5 boat lengths away. I ask for room to tack. The windward boat says what? You tack. Okay. Now I'm going to go and tack. Maybe it's a little tighter lee bow, but once I start tacking, the windward boat just has to stay clear. So those are the two scenarios. The third one is I call for room to tack, the boat tacks, and I duck the boat and keep going. Obviously, that's wrong, and I can get protested and thrown out for that.
Why wouldn't the boat that's being approached by the starboard boat just duck the starboard boat? Why does he
Well,
have to tack?
if the boat that's coming in is asking for room to tack, the winter boat has to provide that. Now, if it's a duck, if you're calling room to duck, then the leeward boat has to give the winter boat room to duck.
I'm
So you're
just
saying,
envisioning three boats stacked on top of each other,
yep,
heading on a port tack, coming into, let's say, a ley line. You've got a
yep.
bunch of starboard boats coming at you, right? So you, I guess the only normally the lowest of the 3 boats could start ducking those boats, the starboard boats. But you're saying if they can't duck, they have to call room attack at that point.
It's up to them to make the decision. They can decide to call for room to tack or to duck, right? The third boat, the lured boat, can make that determination. So if the windward boat says, "Hey, room to duck," you said, "Well, room to tack," and you can tack. So it's determined by the boat that's to leeward. Does that make sense? Is that
I kind of, I just, I could see it if, if that lured boat could duck those starboard boats, why would he? I'm just saying, why would he have the right to force everybody else to tack when he could duck?
Because that's his choice.
Okay, so that's his choice. He has control.
Correct. He
Okay,
has
because we were
control.
in that situation with a
Right.
surprise one point, and we called for room to tack, and he didn't. He waited to the bitter end, and when we tacked, he didn't keep clear, and he hit us with his stern.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Right. So
Did you
again,
did
the
you throw him
verbiage
out?
is very important. Alex, did you
Did
throw
you
him
throw
out?
him out?
no, I was brand new in the fleet, so I wasn't 100% on that yet.
Wimp.
Well, as Jamie and I have endured over the years, you earn some ranks, and you get tired of people taking advantage of you. A lot of the
Hmm.
pros in these really good fleets know they can come in and kind of force it in, and the likelihood of somebody protesting is pretty minimal at the end of the day, and they just know it. I mean, how many times does it happen? Almost every regatta, somebody comes in there and it's just like they're wrong and they're pushing it really hard. But I think it's important to make sure you understand that the verbiage that has to happen. Room to tack, and then the winter boat says you tack, then you can turn when you want to. If not, they tack, you have to tack. If you called it too early, then you have to tack early. Okay, what else here? From the time the boat hails until she tacks and avoids it. Okay, when a hail boat responds, the hailing boat shall tack as soon as possible. From the time a boat hails until she has tacked and avoided a hailing boat, Rule 18 does not apply, which we talked about is the mark one.
So,
Passing on a hail to additional boat. Yep, go ahead.
so Marty, strategically speaking, as you're approaching this ley line and you have a boat that's just to windward on your quarter, right? Just to windward, you would kind of want to make the call the instant that you feel that you can make the mark and that the other boat, by tacking when you requested them to, can't, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that would be the correct timing on that, assuming that
right,
you're not going to foul the oncoming starboard tackers.
right. And that's where the immediately becomes important in the conversation, right? You hailed for it, and they didn't attack immediately, right? They're going to go slow. They're going to make it a little slower. Well, when does it not become immediate? You know, and that's hard, right? It's an interpretation, and that's why these things become very hard to um to hear. And I think when you go into a protest, you need to articulate, "Hey, I called for room to tack, and they took their time. They didn't tack the boat. It took them." Before the tiller went down, it took them 10 seconds, and that's not immediate, you know? Immediately is push the tiller down and go.
Well, we added
And
that Insta 360 camera, so we can actually go back
yeah,
and reference it. We can't show it, but we can say, hey, we went back to our Insta 360. We it was exactly 12 seconds before they responded
right.
or didn't or whatever.
Exactly. And in the olden days, there used to be a bunch of people that would count down, like, yeah, room to tack, and then they'll go 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and nothing's happening. 4, you need to. And then you go to the
Right.
protest room and tell them I got to 4 1,000 before they actually started turning the boat. That's not immediate, you know. There was a couple other scenarios where you could do that, but that was definitely one of them. But with the cameras, it's become a little bit easier at the end of the day. But you also need to know that if you want to push that guy closer, well, then you tack, and then you just have to avoid them when they start to tack. And that happens a good bit. And it's funny that you don't really hear this verbiage as much on the race course as you actually should.
Yeah, and actually we're using our Vaqueros now, so you can go and show exactly where you are and how quick. Could you see how fast you turned with it?
Yeah. But you don't when you ask physically stated room to tack,
Yeah.
right? That's the key. When did you say it and how long until the other boat turned? And with the GoPro, then you have data to be able to use for that.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And that's what's becoming, it's becoming way more accepted now in sailing, and I don't know why they kept it out of sailing. I don't really know the rationale behind it, and you'll still see it sometimes. I think we talked about that last time. There'll be some regattas where they won't accept it, but it's actually becoming more accepted,
Well,
a
counting
lot
kind of
more.
makes sense too. It's like I'm in trouble with my mom, and everyone hears you.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what else we have. Hailing. In addition, she shall not hail the obstruction as a mark, right? Responding to boat hails, she'll give the hail boat time to respond. Boat shall, and we taught immediately, passing on the hail when a boat has hailed for room to tack, and she intends to respond by tacking, she may hail another boat on the same tack for room to tack and avoid her. She will hail even if her hails do not meet the conditions, right? That apply up here in these point one and point two. Applies between her and a boat she hails. So let's look at this. When a boat has been hailed for room to tack and she intends to respond by tacking, she may hail another boat on the same tack, which means there's a boat to windward of her for room to tack and avoid her. She may hail even if her hail does not meet the conditions of 2000 hailing to avoid a boat on the same tack. Yeah, because it's just the other boat asking for room. So you have to pass it on, is what they're saying here, right? So let's do additional requirements for hail. When the conditions are such that a hail may not be heard, the boat shall also make a signal that clearly indicates need for room to tack. And that's sticking the hand out and going, tack, room to tack. When conditions are such that a hail may not be heard. There's another, well, I didn't hear it. Okay, well, how was it 5 knots or was it 20 knots? Well, I did raise my hand. I yelled at the same time. Okay, good. Then you've made the effort for these additional requirements, right? It was too windy. There's no way I could hear you, If the boat's 100, feet long, no way I can hear you. The notice of race may specify an alternative communication for a boat indicated her need to room of tack or response, but that's not very typical. In the super yachts it is, but not in what we're doing here with 24. So, and you can see how that condition can happen quite easily, right? Especially in the 24s.
And fast.
And right, exactly. So, okay. I mean, that all makes sense, but I think it's important to understand what the requirements are, right? Ask for room to tack. If you can't hear it, you got to make the hand verbal, making sure there's some other things that gets the attention of the winter boat. I don't know if I didn't show you guys. I was up here sailing a Swan 42 coming into the windward mark, and there was a boat coming in on port. But the boat to leeward of the port boat was 5 boat lengths away to the boat that was to windward. And I sat there and I started yelling. I didn't get it. I couldn't see anybody on the boat. I never made eye contact, so I'm yelling. I'm, jumping up and down. They responded at the last minute and they bore off, and the boat to leeward was still close hauled, and there wasn't enough room for the boat that had bore off to go between the stern of our boat and that boat, and they ran right into us. And it's really funny because the boat that lost was the boat that was to leeward of them that had no damage, because they said they didn't give him enough room. Even though he was 5 boat lengths to leeward of the boat that had bore off. But they determined there was not enough room because now he's heading downwind and the boat still sailing upwind didn't give him enough room. You can see how that can happen. Does that all make sense? Because that does happen
Yeah,
quite frequently.
but did those people hail for room? If they didn't hail
Yeah,
for room,
yeah.
how what
Well,
they as a windward boat they needed to keep clear. So I don't understand how the other boat gets thrown out.
yeah.
Yeah, room
I
to
don't, well,
duck.
that's the facts found was right. They were ducking and they did not give them enough room to duck. And if the boats are close, they both kind of bear off a little bit at the same time or a little bit. But when they're far apart and one boat really turns down a bunch, the lured boat has a really doesn't always gauge it perfectly, and that does happen. I don't know, it happens in the 24s too, actually, a good bit. So you really also have to make sure that, when you're ducking, you're watching the guys that are ducking late and really bearing off hard.
But
I know a
not
couple
only that, you
scenarios.
have to ask for room to duck
Yeah,
because you're trying to clear out.
100%. 100. He
So,
stated he stated he asked for room to duck.
okay,
Um, in the facts found where he had asked for it, and the boat to lure did not
respond.
estimate that bearing off that much. I mean, think about it. If you're docking a boat, what the boat's 8 feet wide on a 24. If you give them, so you may have to give 10 feet of room ish for the windward boat. But if the boat's boring off and going downwind, you might have to give them 30 feet, you know, and that's where that calculation. I mean, it costs. I mean, there was significant damage. It broke the prod. It ripped the whole back, stanchion off the boat. I mean, it was pretty catastrophic. I mean, it was several $1,000s worth of damage, and the guy to lure ended up paying. Um, so just have to kind of understand and adjust for those scenarios a little bit that goes through. Okay, any other questions on that one? All right, let me tell you, I had one. So I sailed the annual regatta up here on a J121. Um, and it was a great weekend, but our race course, we did windward lewards outside, and they had a scenario where you would go to the windward mark and then sail all the way into the harbor and finish inside. And they gave us coordinates to where, like it's a directional, like 1 mile from R2 at 310 degrees, you'll find your finish boat. The fleets that sailed that race, only about a tenth of the boats actually finished. And it was very interesting because, okay, we didn't finish. We went to where we thought R2 was and what the right angle was, and there was no race committee boats there. There was some boat we thought maybe it was a race committee, but nothing, which the majority of the fleet did. And the ones that actually finished the race, they were it was actually on the other side of the sound that we come into here in Newport. So it's not like you could really see it. We saw, it was just very confusing because there's about 150 boats sailing around here all the time. It wasn't pretty plain vanilla. But what had happened is there was a time limit, a TLE. So what ended up happening is the race committee finished the first boat, and 45 minutes after that, if nobody finished, they got scored TLE. So in our fleet, we had 3 boats, I think, that finished, and everybody else got a TLE by the race committee. So that basically meant you got, I think you got 5 points. Everybody got 5 points that didn't finish. So it's not like you got 9 or the 10 boats that were in the fleet. So it turned out to be not a huge penalty by not finishing like the whole fleet. But the question came up, which was very interesting, is let's say, for instance, we went to this place we thought was the finish line, and it wasn't. We turn our motor on, we put our sails on down, and we put the motor in gear. Okay. If the time frame for the TLE had not, we had not hit the time frame for the race to have expired, we we were illegally using our motor throughout the race, and we should be disqualified. And that was the whole scenario of why there were so many redress and protests and things that happened yesterday, because the people that did finish think they should have had a huge penalty for the people that actually couldn't find the finish line, turned their motors on and motored in. Um, so I found that I didn't know and understand fully that what that whole TLE, that could happen. But it did, and it caught out most of the fleets that actually did that. So it was kind of a new one for me, and for a lot of other people in that scenario. I know that doesn't happen in 24s, but again, if there's a time limit TLE, you have to wait until you're racing until that time is over. Is basically what it came down to, no matter what's going on. So very
As a
interesting.
race organizer, that TLE is complicated because no, never mind. It's not TLE. It's finishing boats in place when the race committee thinks that
Yeah,
they're not going to meet the time limit on their subsequent races. That's the part that's really complicated for a race organizer to do that. They can basically only do it when there's only one boat left.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Their position's already been determined.
all right.
We did have a J70 North Americans in Annapolis where half the fleet got TLE'd, and there were some really good people that were really far back that benefited from not getting last. But the TLE was just basically how many finish plus two, I think is the number. I'm not 100% sure. So
It
it was
varies
very
per race.
controversial. Yeah, right? Yeah, something like
Right.
that. Specific to so.
That's an interesting. It's an interesting RC uh, parameter that they can set is what will the time limit expired score be? Whether some people that are not familiar with it tend to do, the same as DNF, which is
Right.
slightly unfair. And then the other people do the number of people that finish plus two or whatever other number they think is right. But
Yeah.
it's weird because it really depends on how many boats have finished, because if only one boat finishes, imagine a whole fleet getting thirds, right?
Right. That's exactly right. And that was the controversy at the J70 North Americans. Yeah.
It can throw the scores for a loop.
Yeah. And the race committee, typically know when they're in trouble and they need to, abandon the race if it's unfair conditions. And then there's that whole argument, well, is it unfair even if it goes to, 2 knots of breeze, things like that. So it was very, very interesting weekend for that stuff. All right. Any other thoughts, comments, gestures? All right.
Well,
Thank you,
perfect.
Gary.
Well, thank you again, Marty, for putting this together
Yeah.
and helping us out on these. All righty. Well,
I really
we will,
appreciate it, Marty.
yeah,
Yeah, no
hopefully we'll
problem.
see everybody Thursday.
See ya.
Sounds
Take care,
good.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Marty.
you.
See you guys.
Thanks, Alex.